topic that Deepa brought up yesterday was death. And so I thought, what is the problem with death? What's the issue there?
What is the issue?
Yeah.
It's not wanted. At least what is perceived as what that is. So, why would it not be wanted by default? Because it's seen as losing the possibility of engaging with things in a pleasurable way, usually. And why would that be important? Because pleasure is valued. So death is then not wanted and unpleasant only because it interrupts the things that we want.
More or less.
Yeah. So what would happen if there's nothing that you want? Would that still be a problem?
No.
No, not at all. And that's the whole, what we spoke about, the upadhi and possessions, and goes as deep as your sense organs, your body. Not being developed in regard to the body means taking it up as yours, means depending on it, means wanting what it wants, means basically being within the sixth sense space, within sensuality. Which means death, it's going to be a problem, because these things are subjected to that cessation, interruption and ending. So then it's only your ownership that makes you be affected by that problem. If you disown, if you abandon your eyes, ear, nose, other senses, if the mind is fully withdrawn from sensuality, sees the danger in it, then nothing that death affects can be relevant to you, can cause you pain. And that's the dispassion. Dispassion is the result of practice. Dispassion towards not getting rid of things, not like managing them, whatever else. No, just being dispassionate towards their arising or ceasing. Doesn't matter. So how then to develop that dispassion? How would one go about it? Something else than
sense restraint and virtue.
Exactly.
You
Yeah.
go to the sensors. Repeating the record.
But what else? So, for most people, when they start, sense restraint and virtue would be just kind of bearing the pain. But that's not the enduring we talk about. The endurance we talk about is on that mental level of not acting out, not welcoming, not delighting, as the suttas say. So, bearing needs to come first, yeah. But how do you endure things on the mental level? So it's not just kind of mindless bearing, like asceticism. How can that become more?
By developing understanding.
Sure, but of what specifically? Like how would I do that? So I am bearing, I'm keeping the precepts, I'm bearing the elements. But, we talk about enduring things on the right level all the time, not trying to get rid of them, not justifying them, not managing them, not psychologizing them. So how do I learn to endure things on that level? What can I look for? Where do I look for that? Because all I see is just bearing of the pain. What do I do within that? If I'm not giving into the management, is there anything I can do? There wouldn't be the management. How do I go about it?
Seeing why these things are painful.
Sorry?
Seeing why these things are painful. And then why am I pressured by these things?
But that can also fall on the level of management and explanation. So, is that what it would determine? Whether I'm trying to manage my pain, or whether I'm enduring it on the right level so I see its nature? What determines the management? Is it what I do, or how I do it? How? Or why I do it? So that's how you look for whether you're trying to get rid of things out of ill will, basically. Because whenever there is the urge and pressure to manage the uncomfortable mental states that arise on, say, bearing of the elements, bearing of the words of others, bearing of the precepts, bearing of the sense restraint, whenever you try to manage, means you implicitly want to get rid of it, which means implicitly there is aversion. And that's why you end up revolving around it. And that's why I keep saying, like, it's about not welcoming, which doesn't mean preventing you from coming at my doorstep. That's not within my domain. My domain is to not welcome you and not delight in your presence. So how do I not delight in your presence? Well, I practice the non-delight while you are present. But if I'm concerned about getting rid of you because, I blame you for this disrupted mind, means I am putting the problem where the problem isn't. And the way to stop doing that is, as we often say, to start actually practicing mindfulness on top of the, sense restraint, enduring the virtue, bearing the virtue, precepts and so on. Mindfulness and self-questioning on the level of why am I doing what I'm doing, including trying to manage my dukkha. So why am I doing it? Is it because I just want to get rid of this pain? So how's that different from craving against discomfort, aversion towards pain that just keeps fueling everything else? So that's that right endurance. Like, you recognize it on the level. So it's not determined by what you do, it's determined by why you're doing it. Because, see, somebody can say, yes, I listen to these discussions and I question myself, but why? Oh, because I want to get rid of the pain right here, right now. I don't want to endure it on that mental level. And that means, so you're using this as just a way of managing your pain. Of course, everybody will start like that. But as long as you know that that's not a practice, they will lead you to freedom from suffering, it will only result in managing the pain, then you can actually focus on upgrading it. Then you will know that there is an upgrade, which is not acting out of the mental state, but instead being able to endure it. And when the Buddhas talked about that, we mentioned it yesterday, the sutta about the master of the thoughts, and the last one is like, you crush your mind with your mind. And people often take that, I just get repress whatever it's. No, you crush your mind with your mind. In other words, you don't go and get rid of the thoughts that your mind has. And mind as a sense does not appear on the level of your attention in the thought. It's always the background. So you crush the background with the background. That's what that statement says. But when people read the mind, they just assume, it's this thought of my mind that I have, that's what I crush. So they end up just like, no. No, actually, it requires wisdom to see that. To endure the mind rightly on the level of the background, you need to see the signs of the mind first. And that's not something you can attend directly. That's something you pick as the background. The simile of the king eating the food. You see the king, you see the food. You don't see anything else. But you notice that he seems to linger along certain dishes more. He dismisses others. On account of that, you see the background of that behavior is his preference. He leans towards this if this is in front. He leans towards that if this is in front. But you don't see that leaning, you infer it. And you cannot measure it or objectify it, because it's not visible. But you can understand it if you're skilled. As the skilled cook would infer the preferences, the signs and tokens of his behavior. Unskilled cook wouldn't. He would just see what's in front of him. Touch, move, eat, do, repeat. He doesn't see anything else. And that's why there is no mind development for such monk, as the Buddha said in that sutta. So it comes down to knowing what you're doing, why you're doing what you're doing, and constantly questioning that, so that it will kind of pull you out of that need, pressure, habit to manage dukkha, because that is the natural response, craving against discomfort. So you need to actually refrain from acting out of that, because it is ill will. Fundamentally, it is ill will. You're trying to get rid of the mental states on the level of not like, I try to get rid of them in a sense, eventually I'm hoping to become an arahant. No, I'm trying to get rid of it means I'm trying to antidote whatever's currently bothering me. That's basically just action-reaction, just responding with ill will towards what's unpleasant.
So mindfulness of death is
one way of defining that could be to see the sign of death.
Exactly. So even when people do the practice of mindfulness of death, it becomes like this sort of contrived, again, antidoting, responding, managing, doing this. If it's left, I move right. If it's right, I move left. No, it's recognizing the context, and then see what are the signs and tokens of your liability to death. Where is the danger there? You realize you can't even conceive how it would be if there were no death. It's just you can't even imagine that. Yet here you are, acting as if death won't come your way. Why is that? That's not going to be measured by your eyes and nose and so on, and your sensations.
You can attend to,
exactly, it's a part of the context. Yeah. So, as we said before, it's that ownership. Oh, it's because things I own. Ownership I assumed. Things I've taken for the sake of pleasure always, for the sake of safety, comfort, all of that. That's why death is a problem. That's why I fear it, that's why I avoid it, that's why I turn a blind eye to it. So, what if I relinquish my acquisitions, as the suttas would say? Then, death is not a problem. I have gone beyond death. That which is subjected to peril and destruction, these 5 aggregates, that's it. That's not my problem anymore. When that breaks apart, that's part of Nibbana. So in other words, you don't need to, and this is true for all of the contemplations in a way, you don't need to do the contemplation of death. You just have to discern what's already there that's liable to it, and why you're not giving it up. As simple as that. Anicca goes down to eye, ear, nose, senses. It's not just a question of your material objects of the senses that you possess. It's the whole domain. And how can you give up your eyes? Can you just pull them out in the same sense you would throw your favorite thing? No. So that's that recognizing of the background and that discernment of ownership of that necessary basis for your experience. So developing this passion towards your body.
Can I ask a question about, because on that, you think in the beginning, like, I want to be free from suffering, I don't want to die, I want to be not liable to death anymore, so I want to go beyond death, but I want to be also free from suffering. That's the sort of, almost, that's the difficulty or the problem, as in you can't be free from suffering or be free from death without basically relinquishing yourself, which is what death is, in a way, the fact that, like, I won't be. So it's hard to practice towards that while also, because in a way Nibbana, or the idea from the beginning of Nibbana is like, myself will not be. That's almost what death is for you. So it's almost like kind of you're aiming towards what you're afraid of. So how do you?
Well, that's like the craving is to be abandoned by the means of craving, conceit by the means of conceit. So yes, you have to want it first, which means it's going to be rooted in craving, either craving for pleasure of liberation or craving out of the aversion towards pain. So that's what directs you towards learning the Dhamma. But if you actually practice towards the right view, you get to realize that, craving is the root of the problem, not lack of satisfaction of my desires. Like, in other words, not because I didn't get what I want, it's because of this rooted wanting. So now you get to understand the middle way that the Buddha was teaching, as a result of which you become aware of your intentions. You don't fuel, you don't welcome, you don't delight the ones that are rooted in greed, aversion, delusion, even if it's, craving to get rid of the dukkha, because that's the practice. I already know that's the management, which means practice is second. Primarily, I want to get rid of the pain. You stop doing that through that discernment, and then you will be free from craving. So yes, on account of your initial craving, you have actually learned how to do things rightly and stop fuel the craving through acting out of craving. So, as the Buddha says in that sutta, craving has been abandoned by the means of craving. And same for the conceit. Yeah, I want to be enlightened and be free from suffering. And because of that, like if you keep revolving around that and you never see the root of that I want and that craving and that aversion towards pain, you won't be free from suffering. You'll just be fueling your craving further. But, as I said, if you meet the right instruction and have developed the recognition of the background and the signs of your mind, which is what Yonisamitsagara is, then you will get to see that middle ground where, yes, craving directed me to learn about this, but now I need to abandon this very craving. So not do things that are rooted in craving. No welcome, no delight, endure it on that level. Not just bear it, but endure it. Endure the mental intention, having recognized it. And not try to get rid of it because it's unpleasant. Not certainly act out of it because it's unpleasant. So that's how you will stop cultivating aversion towards pain. And your craving is factually diminishing then.
So back to that, why is death a problem? Because I think, well, I know for a fact from seeing other people's bodies, inferring my own, that it's going to fall apart. It's for sure uncertain, and it will fall apart, and that's going to most likely feel very unpleasant. Getting sick feels unpleasant. Breaking your arm, not being able to use your body feels unpleasant. So it is going to fall apart. There is going to be some disagreeability, discomfort and pain there. And that is inevitable. And the problem is that I don't want to feel that. But I can't just, cancel out feeling. I can't just kill the body and escape that pain, escape that falling apart. So the problem that I see is that which we read about many times, the identification with the body, taking the feelings personally, taking the body personally. That's the issue there. Because if that identification is not there, there is still a body, and that body will still fall apart. So if that identification is not there, that taking it personally is not there, then there is no problem. That body is just not mine anymore. It's just another body. Why is Pasco's body not my concern? Because I don't take it personally. So likewise with this one.
So how do you not take it personally?
By restraining virtue and feeling that pressure and not taking that pressure personally. Actually seeing it there. I didn't create that pressure. Here it is. And so what you're going to do?
And what is the symptom? What is the symptom of taking the pressure personally? What is the? Well, of course, pressure is suffering. But what is the? How can you? Exactly.
Acting out.
Acting out. So
trying to manage it. Trying
to manage it. Trying to antidote it. Or just acting out towards sense objects. Just holding views in regard to it. What should be done? What the practice is? What I must do to get rid of it. But all of that is exactly rooted in that.
If I don't do that, then what reveals
is the pure pressure.
Pure pressure arisen
on its own. And in itself, that's a liberating recognition.
Yeah, it is not.
You realize, I don't need to do anything. That's why the weight, the burden is not on you anymore. Pressure's there, yet it requires no management, no getting rid of, no responding to this or that on account of the Dhamma practice that you believe and hold the views about. The pressure's there. All you need to do is not welcome it and not delight it, and it's not your problem.
You want to reveal. You want to reveal its nature, so to speak.
Because nature of whatever appears, because it appears, that's why it is uncertain. That's why it's impermanent. That's why it cannot be yours, even if you want it to be yours. So, if you actually are able to endure it on that right level clearly enough without giving into it, that nature will become apparent. Whatever has the nature of arising has the nature of ceasing. I don't need to do anything. And that's how you basically discern what the practice is, what the middle way is.
And that's how you are not affected personally. You don't say, I remove myself from this taking things personally. Well,
it's not a matter of choice.
You're still
people can have the idea about it, but it's what the Buddha said. Like with their self, they're practicing not self.
So you have to undo that self-identity indirectly to seeing the nature of what is pressuring, what is presently pressuring you, the body, the feelings. By seeing the nature, that self is dissolving, so to speak, in the background.
Yeah.
That there is nobody that is now pressuring.
But pleasure has to be devalued, because until it is, one will still see it as
it will be devalued.
The correct way of acting.
It will be devalued if you stick to this, of course, because you obviously.
I mean, because that's the reason why I act in such a way.
Yeah, that's why I want to get rid of the pain.
This pleasure, exactly.
Yeah. So, the only way to devalue it is to take it on faith first that it's worth going against it. Yeah. And then it will become apparent that yes, it is dangerous, it's not really pleasurable, and then you will stop valuing it. But if you expect the devaluing of it to become apparent before you take it on faith and start practicing in that direction, no, you have to meet it halfway, basically. It's not going to happen otherwise.
There's this idea of a peaceful death. Someone can have a peaceful death. Oh, he died peacefully. Look at him. It's obvious. It was peaceful. The angels came and took him up to heaven or something. And you can imagine. I think if anyone had to think about it, really, what if you lose that movement of your arm? You can't. You have a stroke. How does that feel internally? You have you're not a practitioner or something. You can't speak. You got all these desires. How's that going to feel? Peaceful for you? You might look peaceful, but really, how internally is that going to feel? Good? Pleasant?
No.
It's going to be intense. So either that is where you are headed,
But now to play devil's advocate, somebody who has been following our discussion so far might also say, I just continue living my life like I do, and when things become too painful, I just take a bunch of sleeping pills or painkillers, I just overdose, trip out, hoping to not experience the pain of death, and that's it. So why would I even make an effort to go through all of this enduring and everything that is bound up with it? Somebody who is like skeptical or cynical might think like that and not see the problem.
Yeah. So I think they fall into the fourth category of people, whether they hear Dhamma, be taught Dhamma, makes no difference. They're not going to change their ways. Like a dead horse, doesn't matter how much you flog it, it's not going to get up. Some people will practice if they get the point. Some people will practice regardless if they hear it or not. But then you have people that even if they hear the purest Dhamma coming from the Buddha, still won't agree, won't see it, and will dismiss it. So if the level of cynicism is there, if they don't even see the problem, if they think just ending the life is the solution, well, they have plenty of work to do before they can even begin to consider the Dhamma. As in work in terms of clearing up their reasoning and beliefs. They're obviously based on their senses.
And then, the Buddha's doctrine of rebirth clearly indicates that taking your own life does not actually solve the problem.
Yeah, but if somebody is as cynical as you presented it, you quoting some views on rebirth by some authority as far as they're concerned, then that's not going to change their mind. What would change their mind is to recognize that as much as they can dismiss the rebirth, they can also dismiss that the death is the end, because they don't know either. So what if it isn't an end? So is it worth the risk? Basically ask yourself that. If you're that cynical, is it worth the risk? Because if you were wrong and death is not the end, you really shot yourself in the foot there. So is it worth the risk? Because what do you have to lose here if you behave and develop some sense restraint and a bit of composure? Nothing. You're just going to gain even in this life. So it would be a win-win, but it takes transparency. It takes a person individually needs to make an effort in that direction. Like no matter what you tell them, if they are looking for faults and justifications, doesn't matter. I mean, you know, the Buddha himself was a number of times just dismissed because people didn't want to hear it.
So if one were to specifically practice mindfulness of death, the sign of death, or the image, or the phenomena, or the dharma,
Or the background.
or the context, or the significance, there are many ways to describe. It's more general. I mean, it's incredibly general in the sense that any action one does is within this context of the fact that one will die. So
It is your enclosure, basically.
becoming established in that image or that dharma or that
as long as a person is not attempting to access that image directly and attend to it as an object.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's not. It's always the background of
Exactly.
your current
That's what I
situation.
mean by
So
it's
how
more
do you
general,
find it?
yeah.
By recognizing your current situation.
Yeah.
Then you recognize the liability that current situation is enclosed within.
Has to be the presently enduring experience
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
order for it to
Yeah.
be authentic.
But isn't there a problem with death that it's as Daniel said, an inferred experience? It's not part of the Puthujjana's actual experience.
Oh, it
You
always
just
is.
in fear from seeing other people
No,
die.
that's Puthujjana's idea of death is inferred, but because of that inauthenticity, because he basically projects himself into this public world of others, whereby I observe things with my senses, thus that's what my senses are. But if he were to recognize that there is an inherent problem, logical problem with that approach, he would recognize that, okay, so I cannot directly attend to death and experience it beforehand as an object of my experience, because it's what my experience is undermined by. So then you recognize the liability, the possibility, the danger, the peril of that situation, and still you can't fix death.
Mhm.
All you can do is abandon that which is liable to it, abandon your experience in total. And that's how you know you're beyond death, not because you experienced it beforehand and then you learned about it. So the problem of Puthujjana is, even when he thinks about death, he's putting himself first. Putting his point of view that infers or examines death externally. That point of view is first, death is second. Now you can learn about it theoretically in that way, but if you are transparent and you have practiced the right reasoning, you realize, right, but it's my very point of view that thinks about death that is already undermined by death. And that's how you get to see the background that I talk about. You can't attend to it directly because then it's a foreground.
So within the presently enduring experience, whatever I'm thinking or seeing or hearing or tasting or touching, peripheral to that experience, or there is death there.
Yeah, and what would the kind of signs and features,
Dispassion.
practical what would the practical signs and features of that death be, of that phenomenon, of that liability, the background liability that everything could end outside of my control, and nothing I do, conceive, infer, whatever else I revolve around, none of that can actually take me outside of that as I said, enclosure. That is sort of
displeasure. I mean,
displeasure. Okay. What else? What would be the signs and features of that kind of
All kind of despair.
despair? Well, yeah, but that's more like your. That's more like the reaction of the mind that's not developed. But just purely liability of death or the background of death. Let's put it like that. What is the main characteristic of that? What's the main property?
arisen by itself. I mean,
What's the main property of things that have arisen by themselves and endured on their own?
Impermanence.
Exactly. It's the uncertainty. That's it.
Those eyes, that body,
Yeah.
that's all uncertain, inaccessible to me.
Yeah.
So I am enclosed to that disintegrating thing, that thing that's changing.
And that uncertainty encloses me. When I think outside of it, that's already within that uncertainty. There is no outside of it. So that's why in that other talk we did, basically, if you train your mind towards the ultimate uncertainty, so you stop resisting it, trying to get rid of it, trying to antidote it, trying to or act out of it, welcome it, delight in it, towards distraction from it, and so on. That uncertainty that you will train your mind in regard to become dispassionate and not averse towards or afraid from, is Nibbana, the ultimate uncertainty. That's it. That's the phenomenon of Nibbana. Here and now. And then, if you have developed your mind towards that background phenomenon of uncertainty, there's absolutely nothing that can disturb the mind that comes second, basically.
There's no room for any kind of
No,
suffering
that's it.
whatsoever.
No,
because
impossible.
it's
Because any suffering, any dukkha is always because of anicca.
yeah.
Any suffering is always because of uncertainty, or more specifically because of ignoring uncertainty, appropriating uncertainty, contradicting uncertainty, trying to outrun, get rid of, manage uncertainty. That's the dukkha. Anicca, dukkha.
So if you understand anicca, or you get that, you pick up the sign of anicca, and you are thereby, you realize how enclosed you are within that anicca, that will feel like pressure, like a choking, a strangling of yourself.
Not necessarily.
I'm enclosed with anicca. I've got
Initially,
no control.
yes, and for different people to different degrees, but really the pain of it will be determined by how much you're resisting it or trying to outrun it.
Mm-hmm.
How undeveloped your mind is. Developed mind, the mind of composure, the mind of samadhi, is the one that doesn't tremble in the face of things that would want to kind of shake you up, as the suttas say.
Hence, sense restraint and virtue
Yeah.
are so valuable.
Yeah, that's samadhi
preparing
already.
you.
That's the beginning of a samadhi. It's not like concentration of sort of focusing on one point where the whole context, everything disappears. No, quite the opposite. It means the ultimate context of like uncertainty, death, stuff that you cannot possibly, I mean, you can ignore, sure, but you cannot step outside of. That doesn't shake the mind anymore. Does not compromise the composure. Mind remains composed within that.
Just that image of being enclosed. It's felt, but holding things together, composing yourself, not freaking out. That realization, almost as I'm saying, like strangling. It's a kind of, well, maybe strangling is, it might feel like strangling if you at first, but it's kind of suffocating and dissolving that self identity, because there is, the whole experience is inaccessible, outside. You're just here, secondary. Nothing is yours. Dissolution.
It feels like being buried alive.
Yeah. Buried alive.
Yeah.
It's like that's also why the contemplation of death, I was thinking, something you say, I've heard you say in regard to contemplating anicca, is that you have to find things that are dear to you and contemplate their change, loss, destruction. But that's why contemplation of death correctly basically sort of includes anything, the loss, the change of anything that
it's
could
already
possibly
implicit.
be it's included within it, or it's the most, because you can pick something that's dear to you, one thing, and already that's, for somebody who hasn't done it at all, it's already sort of disturbing to think about its loss. If it's mine, it's dear to me. But usually then you don't even think about losing the things that are so close to you, that they're so dear to you, that they are what make you what you are. And so the only thing that would do that is thinking about dying.
But like even that, as we spoke before in the previous video, that the edge of it would kind of wear off.
Yeah.
And then it's like, why is that? Or have you fulfilled the contemplation of that, so there's no more edge? Or are you, on the other hand, It's like, oh no, because you're doing it at the arm's length now. You might have felt it initially, and that arm's length distance will be created if your senses have not been restrained well enough, if you have not been like seeing the danger in the slightest fault and everything else that the Buddha says. Because in other words, even if you don't actively contemplate death, by actually saying no to the sense pull, keeping the virtue, solitude, you are contemplating death. You might not specifically discern that as a theme, as a background of your day-to-day life, but you are doing it. You are there.
But it's the same with like mindfulness of the body,
It
mindfulness
is,
of feeling,
of course.
mindfulness of dhammas.
Yeah.
Treating it as not yours, as uncertain, because that's what it is. You know, you're not giving into those pressures anymore. You're acting in the right way.
Yeah, by not
It is
acting
not
out
yours,
of it. Yeah.
But if you act out of it, try to manage it, now you trying to possess appropriate.
Forgetting it.
Yeah, forgetting the
and
image.
that's what
the right order.
like again,
Ignoring.
it's hard for people to. Well, it's hard for people to hear, and it's even harder to give up that need of management. That's kind of that Dhamma is misconceived as. So basically, people approach the Dhamma practice as a way of helping them manage the pain. That's not the Dhamma. That's management. Dhamma uproots the pain completely, makes you unliable to it anymore. But that's hard. See, you really need to give up any idea of your escape outside of what you're enclosed with in order to discern where true escape is. So you need to basically take on the pain first, in the sense of not acting out of it, not welcoming distractions or sensuality, not trying to get rid of it either. And that's when you will also realize how deeply rooted craving against pain is. Like you have, for example, the experience of anxiety, which is just the experience of uncertainty. How many people have developed their mind that they can endure that anxiety without acting out of it, without justifying it, psychologizing it, without doing the Dhamma as a response to it? Can just be unmoved by it. Not many, because that would require serious development of the mind on the level of you have now thoroughly understood the root of the action, your intentions, and the craving behind. And the reason why people can't, because the craving to get rid of the ultimate discomfort of uncertainty, i.e. anxiety, is just too much to bear. So yes, it will be too much to bear, but that is the goal. That's what you need to train for. That removing that resistance, not removing anxiety. Uncertainty remains. Things have been uncertain and remain uncertain. What has changed is the level of resistance to discomfort of uncertainty. And that's samadhi. And that is safety. So you develop that type of context, recognition, and composure in face of that. That is Nibbana here and now. Nothing can move you.
It's even just like what you said, the mindfulness is even just recognizing, let's say, the body, the fact that you don't need to think about death even specifically, but the fact that the body is there and it's already just something that is there on its own, in a way that is, you have no choice about it, no say in it, nothing you didn't choose it, create it, it's not unaffected by anything that you could do or read, like whether the Buddha says that the body is there or not, the body, you're still kind of within it. It's almost as it feels almost that same sense of anxiety, or it feels like something you're enclosed within, almost as much as the idea of being liable to death, as in it's just something that is totally inaccessible to you in a way.
Yeah. Well, that's
I guess,
yeah.
yeah,
That's
it's that
that's what
picking
that
up on
is.
this
The
thing that
extent
you-
of the body
Mhm.
is the extent of the death. The extent of the enclosure.
Mhm. And it's something that you cannot help knowing in a way. Like it's not.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah. You cannot help. You cannot know in a direct sense because you cannot become the object of your senses.
Yeah, no, not in that sense, but.
But you can discern it,
Mhm.
like in that signs,
Mhm.
the necessary signs and features of that. But in order to discern it, you need to stop going down the kind of directions and baits that senses set up for you. So see, by going after sense objects, you have already taken up implicitly the sense organs. You have taken up the body. Even if you say, I contemplate the non-body and anicca and death, no, you're still aiming at the sense objects, including, thoughts of management and views and so on, means you are taking up the body. You haven't truly allowed that enclosure of your situation to become apparent, because that's unpleasant.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's kind of what I meant, that the body, even the fact that the body is alive is almost as dangerous as the fact that the body will die, or is as bad as anicca.
Yeah, that's where the danger is.
Exactly.
Because you're not dead. That's
Yeah,
exactly
that's exactly why it's dangerous.
That's where the danger is.
So without right view, there's no alternative to management. The difference between managing and uprooting is a practice after the right view has.
Yeah, basically, yeah. The management is when there is no right view.
Yeah.
In other words, you're still revolving around same principles of aversion towards pain, delight in pleasure.
You said yesterday, what was the closest, what can you do then? And in a way you can do the right viewing.
Mm-hmm.
You just do that.
Yeah, do the right view. How do you do that? Well, by not doing all sorts of other things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that is like, when you say, Master Gautama, the Buddha said first, if I fought the waves, I tie myself out, and if I stood still, I sank. So Master Gautama, how did you then cross the wild river, cross to the other shore? He says, but by not fighting the waves, by not standing still. So it's like, okay, so what do I do then? Well, that's what you do. Not doing things that are rooted in greed, aversion, delusion, including your idea of doing the practice. And that the more you commit to discerning that context and intentions, where they're rooted, the clearer this middle way of non-doing. Well, the clearer the doing of the middle way, which is the way of non-doing, becomes apparent. But now you can just jump the queue, as we said yesterday, and mystify this non-doing of the middle way, and then just abstain. No, the problem's still there. So that's why you should not tolerate your situation that hasn't been resolved. Liability to death is still there, sensuality is still there, and you're just quoting the end result of, yes, Arahant has gone beyond duty, and is nothing, so there is non-doing. Okay, but it takes some serious doing in order to get there. Doing of what? Well, doing of sense restraint precept, doing of not welcoming, doing of non-managing. So doing of certain non-doings, that's what's required.
And clarifying the right order.
Yeah,
Seeing
that comes with the right view, yeah.
Holding it.
Investigating intentions.
Yeah, I think that's probably, we said that before, the most practical thing that in terms of contemplation and thinking about, of course, keeping the precepts first, Vinaya and so on, but then not just take for granted what you should do, what you should know. Why am I doing it? That is the root of the problem. Things that are rooted in the intentions of greed, aversion, delusion, and then rooted in aversion towards discomfort, rooted in delight towards pain. That's why I say often people's meditation practices end up revolving around the same principles. As the sutta say, meditating with sensuality. If you don't have the right view, you are meditating with sensuality. Whether you know what sensuality is or not doesn't matter. Because why? You're doing it because you still delight in the idea of pleasure. or you're doing it because you still delight in the idea of averse towards pain, avoiding the discomfort, mental, emotional discomfort, and that's why you won't be doing it rightly.
That also would require to see that there's nothing that you have to do, as in everything that you're doing is really your choice, that it's not because even that is not something that I used to really realize. Like there'd be lots of things that I would do just because I assume they have to be done. Has to be done.
Yeah.
Duty.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what that virtue and duty is. Yeah.
But you wouldn't, if you've discerned the sign of death or body or feeling, you just wouldn't, crave. I mean, that's a sign. If you're
craving is incompatible with that context.
Yeah. So if you find yourself angry or lustful, or
you will still be able to maintain perspective.
Okay, I haven't clearly discerned the death in this moment yet. So what's going on? Why hasn't that?
Yeah. Well, I think that Dhammapada verse, isn't it? Says
quarrels,
quarrels basically are fueled and maintained by the ones that forget that we are all condemned, like imprisoned within death, subject to death.
Yeah.
If you don't forget that, you will be unable to quarrel. You just going to the extent of quarrel and fighting will become inconceivable because you just see the enclosure of this whole situation, mine and yours, in that sense. Yeah, so it is incompatible with it. Yeah.
Because the idea of enclosure, and those 4 great mountains coming. That's what the body is. It's just disintegrating and crushing. Slowly.
Space receding.
But I can move here and now I've got space. All the space. I'm not afraid of death.
No.
Yet these things are. I don't have to worry about someone coming to kill me, because this thing is
already
crushing and coming to kill me. So there is no really specific fear, because the whole thing is doing that anyway. My body. Anyone, as you said before, can put themselves in a room, lock the door and see how that feels. Just that you can still move your body, but now your enclosure is a bit smaller. It's not so bad when you got this massive enclosure. It feels very big. You've got space.
That's all people need to do, really. Just say no to distractions and seclusion, and that's it. The enclosure is going to become much more obvious, revealed.
Where there is birth, this.
When there is the manifestation, there is the enclosure, because that's what's manifested. There is death.
Disintegrating, I like it. Disintegrating. It's just aging,
decaying.
But it really is like the ultimate sign of dukkha, in a way, that this every action that you do in the life is determined by needing to avoid unpleasant things and looking for pleasant things. But now you just have the thought, for anybody, whether you practice or not, that there is this death coming. It's unpleasant. You can't really, if you really think about it seriously, you can't be indifferent to it. And here's this thing that you can't do something to get rid of it or go against it.
Yeah, because that's exactly what the king said.
Exactly.
He said, what would you do if I tell you a mountain coming from the left? Well, I'll go right. From the right, well, I go left. From the north, from the east. And he said, well, what if they're coming from all 4 directions? Well, but you can't move away from it. What would you do then? Oh, well, then I would practice the Dhamma. I said, well, I'm telling you, there are 4 mountains coming from every direction. So it's unmanageable. You can't outrun it, can't get rid of it, you cannot manage it. So better stop managing it while you still have an option to see it rightly before it's too close. That's the point. And then the pain of not giving in to managing it will be dampened, will result in composure and samadhi if you keep your virtue, sense restraint, moderation, seeing the danger in the slightest fault. The pain won't be as bad, but it has to happen. How much of that pain has to happen? Well, depends how much you resist it and how much of your virtue has not been developed. Sense restraint has not been developed. Seeing the danger in the slightest fault has not been developed. But it's the one way only.
Yeah.
There's no other option.
No.
For some people, that one way will be very unpleasant and slow. For some people, it will be very unpleasant but quick. For some people, it will be not unpleasant but slow, and not unpleasant and very quick. But it's the same way, not various options.
Because it's really it's something you cannot manage. I remember having that before I knew about the Dhamma. Just that, when you think really, okay, I'm actually going to die.
Yeah.
And I remember even consciously thinking, I cannot keep thinking about this because I'm literally going to go mad if I have to. But yes.
I was trying to convince my parents and like all my friends, and they were just like, no, it's fine. I was like, but no, seriously.
And then you convince yourself.
So I'm not going to forget this.
No, like if you don't, as I said, and see that recognition in itself, say, oh, that's a problem, would be enough for somebody to take Buddha's teaching on faith in terms of, okay, I will be restrained, I will keep the precepts. I don't necessarily see an immediate benefit from it, but they do offer solution to the problem, the ultimate uncertainty. And if you are kind of doing it rightly, in that sense, if you stop just trying to manage it and paste the views of what's happening and what you're doing and what you're responding, and see it for what it is, then you actually do realize, okay, there is a way out of this, not by removing the context of death that I'm in, removing the enclosure, but by removing my resistance towards it, my gratuitous sort of aversion towards that. That's it. Remove the aversion and you are free. And that's why often the practices of people, meditation techniques, managements, are just other ways of perpetuating aversion towards discomfort, or perpetuating delight towards the prospect of future pleasure. So it needs to be given up.